We will dig into what is monolithic architecture, microservices architecture, and how are they different from each other. So the book's definition describes monolithic architecture as a single-tiered software application in which the user interface and data access code are combined into a single program from a single platform. Okay, so mono means single and lithic means stone. So as the name suggests, it is one container where the application or source code of the entire system resides. Let's further understand it with the help of a diagram. So here is a very basic mode of a flight booking web page. We send requests via HTTPS to the web server, which further sends it to the database and returns the data requested. As you can see, the login page, the flight selection page, the additional services page, and payment processing page, and all of its source code reside in this one container. This was once the most popular architecture. So, the advantages of monolithic architecture are this type of architecture was easier or say faster to develop as only a single application was to be deployed. So from the diagram, we can say that this type of architecture is easy to understand because of its low complexity. Another advantage is that the network latency and security problems were less. But let's now discuss what were the challenges faced by this type of architecture. So we know that all the services of a flight booking system are deployed in a single container. These services coexist within a single web server, which means that they were tightly coupled. So even for a small change, the whole application was to be redeployed. This was one of the biggest disadvantage. It becomes too large in size, which is difficult to manage. So as the size of the application increased, its deployment time also increased. So suppose there is a new developer joining and he is responsible for the additional services page. But he has to understand the whole source code or UI of the web server to work on one page. Okay, there's this myth that we cannot scale horizontally in monolithic architecture, but we can scale out horizontally when the traffic load increases. So I can add more databases or add a load balancer to manage traffic. This process is very inefficient and takes up more resources, so horizontally scaling is not preferred in monolithic architecture. It is very difficult to add new technologies as it affects the whole application in terms of cost and time. It is not reliable as if there is a bug in the login page. It brings down the whole application. Now let's discuss about the microservices architecture. This type of architecture arranges an application as a collection of loosely coupled services. In this type of architecture, the applications are made up of smaller services communicating with each other directly using protocols like HTTP. So here is the diagram of the same flight booking system but in microservices architecture. Here we are basically breaking our container into smaller services. The advantages are very evident. They can be deployed separately and accessed through API gateway. So what is API gateway? When we send requests to this gateway, it identifies what kind of service we requested and forwards our request accordingly. And each service has its own database as well, which makes them independent from each other. So this is one of the biggest advantage. Now let's see the other advantages. It's easy to manage because of its relatively smaller size. We do not have to redeploy the whole application to update or make changes in one of the microservices. For example, if we need to make changes in the payment processing page, we do not have to change the whole application and redeploy it again. It is easy for a new developer on the project as he needs to understand only a particular microservice providing the functionality he'll be working on. As we saw earlier that when a new developer joins for a specific responsibility, he now can independently work on that service. If a particular microservice is facing traffic load, then we can scale out only that microservice. Each microservice can use different technology based on the business requirements. A bug in a specific microservice does not affect the whole system. But there are disadvantages for microservices architecture as well. The complexity increases with increase in number of microservices. Skilled developers are required to work in this type of architecture. Okay, skilled developers are required to work in this type of architecture because there is mixed technology involved here. As every service, every microservice can work on different technologies. Then independent deployment of microservices is complicated. Microservices are costly in terms of network usage as they need to interact with each other, and all these remote calls result in network latency. Microservices are less secure relative to monolithic. Debugging is difficult as the control flows over many microservices, and to point out why and where exactly the error occurred is a difficult task. So, if you ask me which is the better one, I would say that each architecture has its own use case. So, if your application is small, it requires less developers, and you're looking for a faster way to deploy with less complexity, you can go for monolithic architecture. But if your application is very big, like Netflix or Amazon, then I prefer you need to go with microservices architecture. Thank you so much.